Life of David Livingston, Part 50. There are many, it's true, who imagine that the scientific inquiries which are being made in regard to the great age of the world, the races which existed long anterior to the historic period, and the origin of the human species are founded in a spirit of skepticism, and hostility to Christian civilization, or rather, to Christianity as a religion. Doubtless there are many scientists who put no faith in Holy Writ as much as has been commonly understood. Others, and these among the most distinguished of men, are no less devout believers in Christianity than they are firm believers in the great age of the world and antiquity of man. The devotees of Christianity have, in not a few instances, mistaken an ally for an enemy. This was notably the fact in an example which is here most appropriate in the case of the modern origin of the science of astronomy. The Christian Church, as then existing, pronounced as religious heresy the plain truth that the world moves, and that the sun neither rises nor sets, but is stationary. The sublime center of the universe of planets and stars, and perhaps inhabited worlds, whose movements must be controlled, as the vast system must have been originated by one infinite wisdom and power and goodness. In due course of time, it was discovered that astronomy did not militate against Christianity, and the Church not only ceased putting astronomers in prison, but learned that the acceptance of all truth, come from whatever source it may, is a Christian duty, and many of the most distinguished astronomers have been no less earnest exemplars of the Christian system of religion than any monk who ever wore the pavements of a monastery and left the world no wiser or better than he found it. As it was with astronomy, so it has been, even of late years, with the science of geology. The era of imprisonment for heresy has indeed passed by, when men begin to construct a comprehensive science on the study of rocks. But as their revelations become more extensive and more wonderful, it again appeared to many there had arisen a formidable foe of Christianity. And the new science was assailed. Accordingly, it has not turned out that these disputants were as wise and as they were zealous, and they were undoubtedly sincere. Though the sun never rises and never sets, we should be stupid indeed were we always, when speaking of his appearance on our horizon or his disappearance therefrom, to state the fact in words of scientific accuracy. The world has never yet been slow enough justly to permit such waste of time and words. Not only the almanac makers, but the most celebrated astronomers persist in saying that the sun rises and the sun sets, and properly understood, it is perfectly true, though scientifically false. To all appearances, for all practical purposes, to the inhabitants of earth, the sun does rise and set, and when one so says, whether inspired or uninspired, one simply conveys the idea that he intends to convey, and this is the province of language. As astronomy appeared to be utterly opposed by certain expressions of Scripture, but was found not to be upon more liberal construction of the language, as well as more philosophical, so geology appeared to be. It is apparent demonstration of the vast age of the world, and later, of the great antiquity of man, hostile to the revised canons of the church, and especially subversive to the Mosaic account of the creation and the generally received system of chronology. The conflicts thus arising have dissipated many erroneous theological constructions and dogmas, but they have in no manner affected the foundations of Christianity. There are many eminent geologists who are earnest Christians, and though Dr. Livingston himself has done geology incalculable service, he has done Christianity incalculably more. It may well be doubted whether any single theologian of the age has conferred more valuable service upon Christianity than Hugh Miller, the great geologist of Scotland, whose scientific works are perhaps the most fascinating of any of the English language. There can be, then, no well grounded fear of science overturning Christianity. It's more likely thereby to be, in the end, not only the thoroughly and correctly understood, but more firmly established than more generally adopted. Even the inquiry which is now receiving so much attention from men of thought, that the origin of man not need be deemed as fraught with any real danger to the system which has given the world its present civilization, were it possible to establish Mr. Darwin's theory of evolution, and that it is more than a theory, cannot be claimed for it is by the most devoted advocate, and established man's origin in the ape would the act of his creation into man from ape be an act of infinite power and goodness. For the infinite power and goodness of the act consists in the creation, by some means, of a being of intellectual and moral attributes. The act of divine power is in breathing into the nostrils the breath of life, and causing the being to become a living soul. Even Mr. Darwin will not dispute that the ape was in the long ages evolved from dust, nor that, so far as science has shown, or probably ever can show, there is no being in the universe with capacity to evolve thought except only God, as shown in his manifold works, and man. Whatever may be the result, therefore, of the interesting inquiries of commerce, religion, geography, geology, ethnology, and now the beginning more and more directed toward Africa with each passing year, we may quite safely conclude, judging from the results of the past, that Christianity will come forth out of the conflicts and that may arise, whether they be scientific or of other nature, with renewed beauty and power, with more liberal and enlightened views, doubtless some of time upon some questions which have been erroneously considered, but with greater influence on this account, and with brighter prospects of more speedily than might have been but for these conflicts, extending the rule of her pure and beneficent morality among the nations and tribes of men. Chapter 23. The results of the explorations in Africa. It would be difficult to estimate the results present and sure to come in behalf of science, religion, and humanity. Of the explorations and missionary labors of Dr. Livingston and others in Africa during a period which embraces but little more than a quarter of a century. The manner in which Livingston conducted his missionary labors has already been pointed out, but more with reference to their connection with people outside of Africa, with men of letters and science and of trade in the civilized world, than with reference to the natives themselves. Nevertheless, it is a fact that the Christian religion has nowhere in Africa been anything like so generally adopted, practiced, honored by the natives as in the country of the Bakwains. And it was among the Bakwains that Dr. Livingston performed his principal missionary work. Among that people only did he establish a permanent missionary station. There he had his home in Africa, and his children were born. Unquestionably, the labors of the Reverend Dr. Moffat, Dr. Livingston's father-in-law, were of the highest importance in some respects. The scene of his studies was at Kuruman, several hundred miles to the southward of Colombang, where Livingston was stationed. He translated the scriptures into the Bakawana language, traveled and preached over a wide domain of South Africa, and accomplished vast good. But it was Livingston who infused into the spirit of Christian propagandism practical wisdom and the argument of present as well as future good. He is the Franklin of missionaries, having wonderful power in showing pagans that even so far as their temporal affairs and material prosperity are concerned, the religion of him of Nazareth is the best policy. Much has been accomplished at the Gaboon mission, as has been called, on the East Coast, but it may be said that the principal good it is the mitigation of the woes of the slave trade, and here, with the aid of nations which keep cruisers off the coast, has received perhaps a mortal wound. Nevertheless, the tribes of this coast are exceedingly depraved, drunken, and ignorant. They are universally idolatrous and given to disgusting superstitions and habits. Scarcely more than 100 miles in the interior are the tribes of cannibals, which are doubtless succeeded by others practicing the horrid orgies of man-eating, and across the continent of Tanganyika Lake, and across the continent to Tanganyika Lake. But with the great decrease in the slave trade has sprung up among all these people a wish to encourage in legitimate commerce, with half the ideas of Christian civilization which have been instilled into the Bakwains of South Africa. These unhappy people would soon find ways and means to conduct a large trade in ebony, India rubber, ivory, other products of their country much prized by commerce. Those who live on the coast have become somewhat skillful in daring in navigation with their little vessels made of great trees hollowed out to the pointed, making considerable coastwise voyages. Upon the arrival of a vessel on the coast, great numbers of these canoes filled with natives are constantly moving about from ship to shore, too often carrying off the miserable beings of the Bakroons. This horrible traffic completely done with, they must perforce seek other means of trade, and these their country happily affords in great abundance. The Makololo of Central South Africa, so often mentioned in this volume, were greatly improved by the restless genius of the warrior statesman Sebente, whose remarkable career has been delineated in these pages. These people, possessing a country of great beauty and fertility along the great valley of one of the most magnificent rivers in the world, possessing also vast herds of cattle and many villages and towns, and endued by nature with tractable dispositions and ambitious spirit, continue greatly to profit by the teachings of the great example of Dr. Livingston, related to the Bakwains, and with them speaking the Bechuana language, Christian ideas are rapidly gaining adherents, so that it is but reasonable to expect that they are long and vast extent of country from Cape to Colony to Lunda between the eastern and western coast shells of South Africa will have come under the benignant and progressive influences of Christian civilization. The value of the results of Dr. Livingston's explorations to science can hardly be overestimated. Geography, geology, botany, natural history, ornithology have all received new facts and of value by his labors, while the latest intelligence from him clearly points to his speedy success should his life be spared in the solution of that problem in geography which for many years has elicited the studies of the learned and the adventures of the adventurous. But Dr. Livingston has not been alone in giving the world intelligence of the long unknown continent. In the interest of commerce, England sent an expedition to Central Africa in 1850 under Captain Richardson, which with whom were associated Dr. Overweg and the celebrated Dr. Barth, upon the latter of whom the work of the mission developed on account of the death of both of his colleagues. The result was published in a most elaborate work, which mention has been made in the early pages of this volume. Dr. Barth traversed the African Sahara from north to south and again from south to north, near the middle, passing through Merzuk, the capital of Fezzan, Gat Tintalust, the capital of Absin, Agadez, and Katsena, whence on the journey out Dr. Barth proceeded to Kano, Messrs. Richardson and Overweg going to Lake Tsad. Dr. Barth remained in Africa about 5 years, exploring the country from east of Lake Tsad to Timbuktu. All this vast country is inhabited by a remarkable people, or a variety of remarkable peoples, who are good horsemen, sustaining large armies, chiefly of cavalry, adroit robbers, cruel, vindictive, having the worst form of domestic slavery, but whose number many millions of souls, cultivate vast tracts of land, raising corn, rice, millet, tobacco, cotton, other products in many extensive towns and walled cities, carry on great operations in manufactures, trade, mining, and are almost constantly at war. For the different states are independent of each other, each empire governed by its own sheikh, the lesser sovereignties by sultans. The common religion of the people is that of Mohammed, but there are remnants of pagan tribes, some of which are yet even independent and wage war deadly with their cruel oppressors. The country is well watered and may be generally described as a vast plain, diversified only at wide distances by insulated mountains and no great height. In this expanse, the general name of which is Soudan or Sudan, the most celebrated city perhaps is Timbuktu, which, from remote antiquity, has been the meeting place of many caravans and converging lines of traffic. Sokoto and Sakutu was formerly a city of 50,000 inhabitants, but has of late years decreased in importance. It is noted that its excellent manufacturers of leather and iron, and its general markets, which always bring together great numbers of people, and of wonderful variety of articles for sale. Kano, the capital of the province of Hausa, has a population of 40,000 souls. The city is surrounded by a wall of clay 30 feet high and more than 15 miles in extent. Much of the enclosed space is occupied by gardens and cultivated fields. The cotton cloth woven and dyed at Kano is the chief article of commerce. The fine cotton fabrics of the Timbuktu market are really manufactured at Kano. Dyed sheepskin, sandals, ivory, and kola nut are largely exported. Kuka, the capital of Bornu, is near Lake Tsad, but is a small city of inconsiderable importance. Yola, the capital of Adamawa, is larger than Kuka. Yola is the capital of Adwama, larger than Kukwa. It is the province of that Dr. Barth discovered, the Bene River, a navigable stream and principal affluent from the east of the Niger. There are many cities of this portion of Africa, far more important than the capitals of Bornu and Adamawa. Polygamy is universally practiced, and there are probably more slaves than freemen throughout the vast expanse between the equator and the desert of the Sahara, and Senegambia and Abyssinia.